Okay, always difficult to transition from watching something that's obviously very difficult to watch. But I would like to ask Arsinée and Marie to come to the podium and introducing Arsinée and, more importantly, leading the discussion today. Okay, and she's going to come back in a minute, but is a visual theorist and Marie-Aude Baronian, who just left the room, but she's going to come back, I promise. And she asked me to keep this very brief, and so that I will do. Dr. Baronian, who's going to lead our discussion, is an associate professor in the Department of Media Studies at the University of Amsterdam, and her degrees are in film studies and philosophy. I got to know her in 2014 when Marie joined the University of Michigan faculty as a Manugian visiting professor and taught an incredible course on the representation of genocide in film. Her research focuses on various topics such as Armenian diasporic visual culture, ethics, aesthetics, French thought, archive, and memory, where, of course, this piece is relevant. She has specifically worked on visual artists such as Arsinée Khanjian and Garina Torosian, and her most recent monograph is Screening Memory, the prosthetic image of Arsinée Khanjian. And in addition, she has published articles that sort of indicate a shift in her work, such as screening fashion, horizontality, minimal materiality, and manual operation in the Journal for Visual Culture. And so, as I said, it indicates a new direction that she's taking towards fashion and materiality in film. And she's also working on a book that she told me about, which is about one of the afterlives of Aurora Madiganian, which is Aurora's suitcase. And this is held apparently by the Armenian Genocide Museum in Yerevan, and it's a sort of fascinating endeavor which I can't wait to read about. And thank you, Marie. This is perfect timing as I'm wrapping up. And thank you for returning to Ann Arbor once again, and also leading the discussion. So I'm passing this on to you.
Yes. Thank you. I don't know what you said about me, but thank you. Arsinée, maybe you. So, yeah. On va s'asseoir là. So thank you everyone for being here tonight. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, the Center, for inviting me again. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really happy to be here, especially to be again in a conversation with Arsinée Khanjian. I will come to that. I think Arsinée is someone who need hardly any introduction. I'm sure you recognize her from being one of the main actresses in Armenian cinema. I think you played in not all of her films, but the majority of his films. But tonight you're here, obviously, in relation to this performance, which I'm very glad we were able to screen tonight. Not live, unfortunately, but hopefully another time, maybe. And yes, we called it a conversation because actually a year ago, I had probably one of the longest Zoom conversation of my entire life with Arsinée. I really, it's not an exaggeration, but we had a 5-hour Zoom meeting discussion without a single second of pause, I think, and it could have gone longer and longer if I didn't have to teach the next day. And this is something that has been, by the way, it's a conversation, an interview I conducted with Erika Biolconi that I want to mention tonight. And so this has been published, Melanie has mentioned it, in the journal Society for Armenian Studies, Society for Armenian Studies, and thanks to Tamar Boyajan. So I'm happy to pursue this conversation. Don't worry, it's not going to be 5 hours long. It could be, but we're not going to do that. And of course, I encourage you to read this, this transcript conversation, which I'm sure will give you a lot of insight in what we have seen tonight. But I'd like first to start with a more general question to you about, obviously, the aesthetic choice, the artistic choice you made to introduce the story of Aurora Mardiganian to us. For those of you who are not familiar with Aurora Mardiganian, since 2015, she's been a very important figure, very iconic. I think the films or the story has been, circulated everywhere, but somehow your piece really brings something different. And I know that that's something we share. We've been both obsessed with Aurora Mardiganian for many years. And you made a very specific choice, right? Very clearly. Melanie has mentioned it. This is what we can call an intermedial or multimedial piece. Basically, what it means is that it brings and weaves together different media. Obviously, this was made for a theater, but you also saw a lot of different media in this piece. Obviously, film, but also video, theater, many references to, I would say, also choreography and dance. There is also some sound and music. I mean, there are a lot of media together and a lot of different superimposition of sound and images. So maybe the first question I'd like to ask you is indeed to go back a little bit to what was the vision behind it in bringing all these different media together in order to tell the story of Aurora Mardiganian, but not, as we probably see it, in a very classical, biographical, celebrating way, I would say.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Marie-Aude. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, the Center of Armenian Studies at University of Michigan. And thank you for the Haidostian family for your support of everything that really pertains to the history of the Armenian culture and everything around it. And particularly thank you for having invited me through Marie-Aude and Melanie for this unusual piece, as you said. The reasoning behind it was a very urgent one and pressing one, in as much as when I got invited in 1915 out of a very surprise encounter with Shermin Langhoff, who is the artistic director of the Gorky Theater, and she was, as was mentioned, in Berlin, and she was organizing this long platform of all kinds of, not only theater, but music, dance, film exhibitions by Armenian and other scholars, artists, and so on, different backgrounds, Turkish, Armenian, American, whoever had material on the Armenian genocide from an artistic perspective, but they were also historians who were invited at some point. So I met her for another reason, and then she suggested that I would do something for the theater, which was like the most amazing thing I would have, offer I have probably got in my life, because I come from theater, and theater is a very important medium in my understanding of image, film or otherwise, but creating an image within a frame. And I said, well, I don't speak German. She said, you can do it in any language you want. And I realized at that moment that if I say, let me think or whatever, I will not do it. It was a terrifying thought. Aurora Mardiganian had been on my mind since 2006, 2007. Arsinée Khanjian had made a very interesting installation of the 7 women who had to represent her during her touring of the film, who were not Armenian. They looked like her, and I would give anything to have been a fly on the wall to find out in what language, what kind of pretend language they were speaking and what they were saying, since these were actresses that were selected, and they had no idea of what Aurora had gone through.
So just to clarify, the 7 lookalikes, that was the anecdote that
yeah,
you're
the 7
telling.
lookalikes. And Adam has done a very interesting
Video
installation that was actually also shown on the public plaza of the Gorky Theater, across actually the balcony of where the First World War was declared by Germany. So it was very symbolic that way. So this was the idea, but I was thinking one thing I just want to run away from, because now we're 2015. A lot of people are talking about Aurora Mardiganian. There is this film that had surfaced already, but was taking prominence. It was 20 minutes of a film where the whole beginning is actually, it's not even from Auction of Souls, the film, or Ravished Armenia. It's from another American film of the First World War. So I thought, I can't do anything about that film, working on that film. I thought about maybe using one of the scripts and recreating. I thought, no, that's going to be too artificial. Plus, it's not my script. It's not a script that I necessarily trust either in terms of its historical accuracy. But the most important thing for me was the realization that this woman, as I knew, and at that time we knew about her as much as we did, which was very much last minute, really, acquisition from my part of information about her, is that this woman's life story is impossible to really tell because we don't have real information that can be provided as a biography. All we had were bits and pieces of her story, but more importantly, her rendition through this 45-minute at the time of a video that we had through the Zorian Institute. So I thought, I'm not going to pretend neither playing her, even though I am the child of survivors of genocide or grandchild. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to pretend telling her story, but I will pretend, I will not pretend, but I will try to reconstruct something that she very committedly, and I think it was her energy to survive and her capacity to survive, to arrive all the way to Armenia, going through, to America, going through Armenia and then Norway, etc., to arrive to New York. It just that she gave to herself the mission of being the one who tells what happened to her people. So in a way, when the book was written, or eventually the script was written, we have to believe that, we have to understand that she was telling her own story of an eyewitness account. She was the victim of those horrors that she endured, as I do say, but also she's bringing in what she saw as stories. So effectively what she's doing is she's doing the work of a journalist, perhaps, definitely a witness, definitely a victim, but her reasons to do it all is not to bring attention to herself, is to bring attention to her people, and therefore her society. So she seemed to me, she struck me as being actually what we define as an activist today, to do what activists do, bring attention to issues that have been lost or buried or whatever. And
just also another clarification, that's something you very much insisted on, to see or to interpret Aurora Mardiganian as an activist, but I think also an important fact to remember is that the reason also the film was made at that time was also within an activist framework, because the film was made, was produced by Hollywood in order to raise money to help the Armenian orphans. So there was already even though, of course, Hollywood abused her, as you also clearly saw,
Yes.
in a way.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes, I would say, but not with the same framework. Hollywood did not proceed as she did. Hollywood's motivation, actually, it was Hollywood, but at the same time, it was a commission to Hollywood. It was not like initiated by Hollywood. It was a commission to a director who worked in Hollywood by the Missionary Association, the Nearest Foundation, who really had a very specific agenda, which was Armenians, of course, but also their presence in Anatolia or that part of the world where they were trying very seriously to bring Christianity and to the indigenous people, and it was for maybe a good century, maybe not. I'm not sure about this. It's a historical date, but for instance, Armenian Protestants were the product of this Christian sort of presence coming from America, from Europe, etc. Catholics, the same way, because Armenians are traditionally Orthodox, apostolic, I should say, Christians. So there was what we can see as activism, but it was more to spread the news about what was going on to Christians during the World War I in that part of the world where there were all these other people, but specifically the Armenians who were Christian peoples of the East. But Aurora is different in as much as it was an actual political and historical position that she fought about all her life whenever she could be of any importance. But what is really interesting in her case is that first she was a woman, and then when I mean, the contradiction of the way she's received in Detroit by Armenian community becomes so, it disappears the same way as the film, the same way as her reputation, and she has therefore no longer any ability to talk about this. But you can see the energy of an old woman there, and you can imagine an 18-year-old versus a 70-year-old, 80-year-old woman, and at the very end, it's her voice, very old, that is recorded only on tape, but not on film. You can tell the energy of this woman to still want to talk about that one thing that made her survive. Made her survive and gave her a purpose in life. So I think that's the distinction I would make. But when we talk about the body of the woman and so on, but maybe you can talk independently from what I'm saying now.
But I think if we go back to what you were saying at the beginning about what you really wanted to do, and I think one of the things that the piece addresses very much is really about simply how, as you said very clearly at the beginning, through your actors here, know how to tell a story. This is really what the piece is about. And I had the sense that using all these different media was also a way to constantly question that. You know, what is the appropriate medium in order to tell that? What sort of projection? I mean, I find also extremely interesting that when you have the two actors on stage, we see them as projected onto a screen, right?
Yes.
So there is this double meaning of the sense of projection. We project, our historical understanding of what was Aurora's life, and as you said, this is a very important point, out of fragments, out of an archive that is yet to be invented in a way. And I would
still,
say and I would say that your piece sort of contributes to the construction of an archive, but there is also the fact that in your piece itself you use a lot of screen media that by definition rely on and draw from projection. So this is another thing that I'm so curious about, is this choice you made about using the actors presented while they are physically on the stage, but yet to be projected to us. And also, in line with that, the choice you made to have the head projector and writing the words which I think we should also say something about that.
Of course. Because every time the writing happens, and I haven't seen the work in a while, I get I don't get impatient, but I think, oh my goodness, the first time audience was seeing this, is it gonna sink in what I'm doing? And I would like to speak about that, and then I'll get back to the concept of projection in general, philosophically or artistically. But I think when I read her biography or the scripts, one of the scripts, I realized that there were incredible amount of euphemisms. So I thought, I have to read this again. What do they mean? I mean, it's like, I'm not sure what it's being said. And then I realized that they were actually euphemisms, for instance, such as kissing, which was not really sort of benevolent kissing. It was really rape. When they were playing, it was not really a play. It was a very dangerous and vicious play that was happening. Ravishing, the same way. The story of the donkey, for instance, is probably the farthest I've gone to allow myself to interpret. And to interpret what happened to that young woman. Basically, she turned into an animal, whatever way she was used and abused. So they were exchanging a human being with a donkey. So it's like she became one of the donkeys. So I don't know if this was also clear, but it was certainly my intention, this separation of the stage in two parts, where I'm giving a public, my character being myself, I'm giving a sort of presentation and conference in a history of, or lecture in history of cinema. And the other end, when you see with a lamp and all that, I am in my own domestic environment, doing my research while reading about her, the book, and so on. And what at that moment, those moments, other than Aurora's videotapes, which are probably things that I have been looking as a conferencier. So they are my projection of the images that I'm discovering and making up in my head by reading these accounts of her through the script or the book, whatever, and seeing them enacted in my head. And when I keep calling cut and louder and more in pain, it's the product of the cumulative aspect of how I am projecting these images, and I cannot sustain any further further images of my imagination creating them. So that projection is effectively in the head of the conference giver.
To go back a little bit to the euphemism, so the kissing, which should be actually raping, or the disappearance, which should be actually killing, you know, all this. I'm wondering, was it also a way maybe to be in the mind of Aurora rather also than in yours? In the sense that it's also, of course, it's almost like the euphemism are a mode of survival, because you don't, it's like, you know, the reality was too heavy in order to be, you know, verbalized or reproduced, but also reminding us that she was a very young girl.
She was a very young girl, but she was a very strong personality. As we know, there are Holocaust survivors and Holocaust survivors, Armenian Genocide survivors. I've seen the two sides in my family, and they both survived the atrocities of this genocide. My grandparents, one of them was devastated, talking about post-traumatic syndrome and completely incapable of going on with life. And the other one managed, same place, Beirut, Lebanon, but one did survive in a way and the other did not. what is for me an indication of that, and therefore, talking about euphemism, which is a way of survival or not. Aurora says it herself when you see the crosses in the film, where there are the girls, crossed. The girls appearing on the cross, and she says, "That's not how it happened.
It was worse than that.
It was much worse than that." She says it. She verbalizes it, but she says she doesn't necessarily know the word euphemism or the euphemistic rendition of an image. She says, it was worse than that. This is exactly what happened. And I liked that, of course, courage, strength, need to do it as a survivor as opposed to using the euphemism. She kept remembering that passage is when she's really old. So she's still remembering and she's still commenting the film, the choice of the film versus the reality. So that gave me the sense that I can use for the purpose of the art historian, film historian, to use euphemism as a contradictory way of what you're seeing you on the stage, to create that tension that existed in my head as a teller of. As to the idea of telling a story, I think telling a story is not about necessarily telling about an interesting story. I think telling a story is about rendering meaning to people who do not know about it or who do know but need to be in a way contextualized. And I don't believe that myself as an artist, because I work a lot with fiction as well. I'm not a documentary. I've not been part of a documentary filmmaking, tradition, which now also puts like fiction and documentary together. Documentary films do. I know the process of creation. So the most important thing for me is the ability to evoke what has been the intention of the subject, the story in general, the point, the relevance of a piece of work, and propose it to an audience to bring their own interpretation of it as well. So.
So again, this idea that a story is always, by definition, a reconstruction, a performance by itself, and a reenactment. And the notion of reenactment is also very important in that piece. And I would like also here to make a little parallel with probably a film that most of you are familiar with, which is Ararat, made by Arsinée Khanjian in 2002, where you also play a conférencière, a lecturer, an art history professor. This time you don't talk about Aurora, but in Ararat you talk about Arshile Gorky, which, by the way, is interesting because I always would say that before Aurora Mardegani became so popular, and probably before 2050, Arshile Gorky was always seen as the icon of survival. But there is a very interesting difference between, I think, your role in Ararat and in this performance, is that in Ararat you are completely owning Arshile Gorky. Like, you completely identify yourself, even to a point that it really takes over. And here you see very clearly you take distance from Aurora, like not trying, at least, and I know we discussed at length about that, not fetishizing her. It's like you try to find, or I would say you question the means. Not that you give a final answer to that, but you constantly question the means about how can I tell a story while not turning her into another kind of celebrity icon as she used to be, but was so quickly forgotten. So I don't know if there was also something you did on purpose, this, also this sort of creating this parallel or analogy with the character of Annie you played in Ararat as well.
Well, Arsinée Gorky is a renowned artist, survivor of the Armenian Genocide by many cultures. He became eventually known as that artist, American, of course, primarily Armenian culture, but in Europe as well, in the art scenes and beyond as well. Aurora Mardiganian never had that presence, and Arshil Gorky, in a way, was not also left out by his own people, really, which is something that happened tragically and very sad. That's why she ends up in a home in California. I mean, neither her immediate family nor where were all the Armenians of California at that point? Why did she end up that way? I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. And this notion of fetishization worked very strongly on my almost sort of dismay that here was perhaps a woman, because she was a woman, who was dismissed by her initial sort of activity and her initial efforts to bring history forward was not necessarily accepted by also the Armenian community, let alone what happened to the film later on, because there was a lot of shame as well around what happened. What happened to the men and the boys was glorious in a way because they were heroes. But the women, we know very well that they suffered further in the hands of their own people because of the rapes and the tattoos and the, going into families which were not Armenian families, and God knows what happened to them. So I was pretty upset by realizing that this disappearance was happening on many fronts. So it was important for me not to fetishize at the moment where she is kind of starting to happen in our Western awareness. And I just wanted to make sure that I give her all the voice I can with the existing material at that point, which was just her actual video and voice recordings. So neither the script nor the film. And by the way, probably this was not clear, not only to you, but perhaps even to an audience who was watching it live. The film, the black and white that you saw in action constantly around, not around Aurora, but around every other reenactment, is the actual 20-minute film in black and white that still survives. Because I didn't want to use it.
Which is a film that is a sort of a compilation, huh?
It's a compilation of scenes, still very mysterious as to how they have been put together. And because I did certainly not want to work with that film, because that was not what Aurora's story exactly or would have been about. It was something that meant something. So I thought, yeah, but I felt guilty and I didn't want to completely dismiss it. It has been a very important part of the legacy of Aurora Mardiganian in memory. So I decided I'm gonna put on the margins. And they're gonna be there all the time. So, and I'm pretty sure that unconsciously, as you're watching the main portion of the image, the center of the image on the screen, your eyes are still caught like moments of that. But it was also very important because the images that you're seeing reenacted, perhaps it was also clear, you do see the...
but you mean by the two actors?
By the two actors. You see their feet all the time, which was the purpose. But what the person you're not seeing actually is another actor who is making the incredible choices of finding this in real time a reenactment of the cameraman who is going around and finding the face, the pregnant woman stomach, all these moments whatever. So I wanted to give a sense also perhaps of the image as in film, finished and being what it is, or almost finished, or constructed but considered finished, and the real-time enactment
of the performance itself.
Of the performance through image making.
And to go back 1 minute to the notion of reenactment, because I mean, this is what Aura Madiganian life story was from the moment she put a step in America, right? She had to, at that moment, she became an actress even before knowing that she would become an actress. But I think your piece is all about that. I mean, it's really every moment in the piece is about reenactment. Of course, the two actors, obviously, but also you playing this, you know, this lecturer, and when you read the script and when you read your own text, you also try to, when you also write down this euphemism, as you say, it's all about, okay, how am I going to act and act upon? So there is also, I think, if I may play with words a little bit, but it's this slightly parallel between reenactment, of course, of the traumatic experience, but also as a very important notion within performing arts, and activism, which all of them, you know...
They have the same root.
Exactly, they have the same roots. And it is really a performance about, taking action through reenactment, in a way.
Because enactment, reenactment, are a form of performance, and I can say that the meaning and the roots of it, for me, go back to my childhood, specifically in the case of telling stories of history. I remember very distinctly, not many, but perhaps 4 or 5 moments that were told to me only once. However, I still remember every eye movement and energy of my grandmother, for instance, telling me one of them about how she saved her sister from the gendarme, as she called him, like the Turkish officer, or the gendarme. I didn't understand what she was referring to, but at the end she went on like this, and she wasn't crying. She went on, I did it. I did it. I said, what did you do, Grandma? It's like, I didn't understand what she exactly did. She said, I saved her life. And I said, well, you must be so happy about this, about it, thinking. And that's when she started crying. She said, yeah. And then years later, I had to reenact that moment of her telling the story. And I realized that the gendarme who was going after her younger sister basically wanted to rape her, but she wouldn't want her younger sister to be raped. She offered herself, and she saved her life by
giving her own body.
Giving her own body. Mm-hmm. And when I realized this, I was much older. That is, let's say, I was maybe 16, something like that. And probably I heard it first when I was 10. I don't know, somewhere around there. She had a sister who lived in Aleppo, Anna Khale, as we used to call, and she was visiting Beirut. And I asked Anna Khale, I said, Grandma cried, Nene cried. She said, oh, don't bring that up. I said, no, I'm not bringing it up, but she told me the story. She said, very angry, Anna Khale, and she had a very funny voice going up and down. Very angry voice going on. She said, do you know what happened to her? Do you know what that Turkish soldier did to her? I was there. So it was it was an enactment. It was not a performance, it was an enactment. And where do I draw the line between performance and enactment? I don't know. When you're telling a story so many years later, based on truth and, you know, documentation, archives, and you're, as an artist, you're trying to do that with your body and with your emotional sort of contribution. Where do you draw the line? I don't have an answer to that. All I know is that I have an instinct for it that I feel is justifiable. I can justify or I cannot. And I think that's
yeah, and I think also we could, through also your performance, think about, maybe it's a little bit stretched out, but that's what I had to think of when I saw the performance the first time, about the body being itself an archive, right? But an archive that, I mean, the body is obviously materialized as well, but because the story you just told us, which you didn't tell me before.
We need another couple of hours.
Another couple of hours. Really showed that the body is an archive in itself that we do not always listen to, right? And in a way, that's also what I think I sort of saw through the sort of direction you gave to your actors in the performance. Because the way they were using their body was also bringing a lot of unsaid information, of unwritten information that you were probably hoping to find the archive materials, but that you didn't find. And that's why probably the actors had to go through that. I mean, the donkey, the kissing at the beginning.
The laughing. It's one of my most terrifying scenes, and Taner Şahin Türk does unbelievable work. I mean, every time I'm watching him, and he has to stop himself in that scene, I sort of think, okay, stop it, please stop it for your own sake. And I think it comes from a place as well for actors, obviously. The same thing with Elmira, who is of Persian background, Iranian background. And initially, Elmira's part, the first time, was played by Sesede Terzioğlu, who is an Armenian. No, she's Armenian, born like the other actors in Germany, but her parents come from Istanbul, but she couldn't do the performance because she had just had a baby. So we asked Elmira to do it, and she did a fantastic work as well. And because somehow they understood not necessarily what I was understanding, but they could make that relationship and understand the notion of enactment as in performance from their own stories or histories. I mean,
and it also felt a little bit like a rehearsal. I also have the feeling that, again, to go to this idea of performance, reconstruction, reenactment, and if we think about the very beginning of the play, before you come on stage, you see the actors preparing the stage, you see them literally their feet behind us. It's really also trying to reveal the behind the scene as well of Aurora's story. Because Aurora's story has been so many times mentioned, but all these different aspects, digging into the archive of the non-existent archive maybe, is also something you're trying to address.
Yeah, the rehearsal, but also the construct.
Yeah, the construct.
The construct you can see as well. And that's why it was very important to have the feet. The feet particularly. Yes, I mean the whole idea. And at the beginning, I mean, I was making it very clear that it was a performance through enactment that was happening. So I was not telling anything that was coming from the archive. I was creating an archive in a way, for an artistic archive perhaps, of a survivor. And the only true element I had from a historical archive or a witnesses archive, a victim's archive, a survivor's archive, an activist archive, are herself, her
own
videos.
testimonies, audiovisual testimonies. Before I give the floor to the audience, I would like to ask you one last question, which I know, as if I recall correctly, has been a difficult choice for you to make for this performance. Is the very end with the shredder. Yeah. So when you put, the slides in that machine, which, by the way, it's very interesting also to insist on the fact that there are 3 actors and 2 machines, the head projector and the shredder. So maybe can you tell us a little bit about that as well?
Well, I think the shredder came as an afterthought, as I was writing in basically 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, this whole thing, and while researching at the same time. So it came at the end as a conclusion. I was looking for what I was doing. Now, the head projector, you will say, why the head projector? I mean, this is 2015, no one uses it. We had hard time later on in Armenia, even in Armenia, to find a head projector. But in Berlin, there were head projectors, and shredders that were of no use because, well, for the papers, I guess, but, at the office. And one day I was walking the corridor at the 3rd floor of Gorky Theater, where the administrators stay, and that's why you would understand why there would be a shredder. They're shredding all the finances, perhaps, and so on. So I thought, oh, what is that? And I was with the dramaturg, Ludwig, and he said, what do you mean, it's a shredder? I said, oh, okay. Continued, I don't know, I think I was going to sign my contract or something like that. I went home that night and I thought, I got it. I can shred my own story. I can shred my own archive. And the only thing that will remain in people's mind who come and see it are what they saw of Aurora. Mm-hmm. As to the head projector, well, I could not have used PowerPoint, could I have? I mean, if I was going to shred later on the... also, I couldn't have that. I could have smashed like a guitar of a rock band. But I didn't want to use a PowerPoint because also I don't know how to use PowerPoints. And I thought it was too
complicated.
Too complicated, absolutely. I remembered from university years the head projector, and also the notion of projection. Again, like the projector, exactly. like a camera going on the what is it called? Come on, the sheets, the
slide, yeah.
The laminated. Transparencies, thank you. Yes. So, and I thought it's an interesting thing. It's transparent, it's going there, but then I'm writing on it, and then it's being projected. So there was an incredible sort of loop happening there. So it was the perfect solution. Yes. Oh. That was the sound that, sorry? No. No, I see. No, that was the sound that was created by, added by the sound artist. Mm-hmm. Because we weren't going to put music. Were they going to put, about a song about Rapama or actually...
Duduk or
anything. I wasn't going to put anything that, because I did not think. Now, I have to say that the song that is... referred to during the part where I'm talking about her coming to Detroit and so on. That song I did find the words. I didn't have the music. It was impossible to find it. And then only maybe 3 years ago, maybe more, maybe 4 years ago, I was still looking for that song obsessively. And I thought, maybe I can use that song if I do a new rendering of the play and so on. And then one day, doing it again and again over the months, I came across YouTube, the music of it, and they were students from New York. I'm not remembering what university exactly, but it was a music department. They had found it, the sheet, and and it coincided at the time where I also found it. I had found the sheet, and I had asked to a composer friend of mine in Toronto to play, if she can, on her piano, which she had done. And at the same time, I was finding this incredible work by the students in New York. And you know what? Still my sound is a better option, whatever it sounds like to you, because it was this very happy, like, you know, kef-like. I thought, what were they thinking? It's like, for the film, I mean, this was really for the film. There was a cheerfulness about it that, well, first of all, it was not interesting, but whatever. So it was about her beauty, also the words, whatever. So I felt that. I mean, we could have used sound, a drone. Maybe it is a bit too high. If I ever do again the performance on stage, I would bring it down, maybe add another. But we wanted a drone, basically.
And last thing I want to say about the head projector, which I also find significant, is the fact that it's handwriting, right? It is also something about literally, physically rewriting something, right? You know, it's this, the gesture of the performance itself, but also the fact that there is, you know, not just technology, but also something handmade, literally.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. It's true. I wanted to give agency to the writing as being personal, something of mine, my own interpretation, or my own, not interpretation, but my own imagining of it all. So, because I mean, I don't know, I mean, people might say, what euphemism, like, or what is the importance of euphemism in history or something, but it was important to me. So when I found out, like, I realized that. So.
Yes, yes, now we're gonna. Absolutely, no, we will give you, yes. There is a mic there.
Oh, hi, everybody. My question is, I watched the Ararat movie, which is, how many years ago that?
2002.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
But a couple of years ago, I watched The Lost. You remember that movie? It was the Turkish-German film, The Cut.
The Cut,
The
yeah.
Cut. That movie touched me so much.
I'm happy to hear that.
And it was unbelievable work he did. The Cut became my favorite. Ararat, it was my favorite, but The Cut gave me those two sisters, how they lost each other later on. It's really comes to your heart. That bottom line is, my wife's asking me, what's the bottom line? Bottom line is, every Armenian should not lose their identity. Sometimes an Armenian would say, Anunaga Inkachiga. A lot of Armenians are disappearing. They're not active. They're not working together in a cultural lifestyle and get together and create another Armenia. See, this is what, I'm from Lebanon. I've been here almost 52 years. And I miss Lebanese Armenians. They're more friendly, more. Here in the United States, if you have to speak, I know. Bottom line is, bottom line is, we need more movies. There we go. Dr. Josep, AGBU principal.
Okay, well, you know, it's interesting what you're saying, and for the sake of not making much longer, I understand the, being myself Lebanese, I understand perhaps I do not necessarily agree with, because I have learned also to find out how many different Armenians there are around the world, and what a wealth that has been to know about each of our histories, first around the diaspora, and then in Armenia. So, and I'm very happy that you liked The Cut. I was also performing in that film. Fatih Akin did a very good job. Unfortunately, he did not know how to stand by the film later on, because he got terrified by Turkish threats that he got. So, and I'm happy that you can discern differences from film to film. Then there was also the Promise. So there were all these films that are happening, not enough, of course, because we didn't start early on as such. However, this is true and not true, because it's our community who didn't know what to make of Auction of Souls. Yes, of course, Hollywood sold it, and they didn't care for political reasons to afterwards to distribute the film further or remount it or re-show it or whatever. But I can tell you a very fast anecdote. This is the first film ever on any genocide, forget about Armenian or anything. So
the very first film in the history of cinema that represent mass violence.
Yeah, there is nothing more important than this. All the Holocaust films that we saw later on, which happened right after the tragic event itself, this was like hardly even finished, let alone recognized, not recognized. No one was paying too much attention to that politically. But in the 1930s, when the film was to be shown, the film was censored in England. So, but then they showed it privately. The UK government, the British government did not want to show it because of geopolitical reasons and so on. But in 1935, they were going to show it in Lyon, if I'm not mistaken, or in France in any case. And the Armenian community decided that they did not want to show it. And the reason was that it was too violent of a film. 1935, we're not talking 1918. So anyway, I would like to have more questions, but this is to say that we haven't known exactly, and perhaps for all kinds of justifiable reasons, but we did not managed, because perhaps we had to first survive from the ashes. We didn't have communities around the world who lived as the genocide was happening in Armenia. Well, Armenia, yes, historical Armenia. So, yeah, anyway.
Thank you, Arsinée. It's a fantastic film. Better this time than the first time I saw it. I don't know why.
Thank you.
And thank you, Marie, for opening it up for us in that way. So here's my question. This film shows what I would call a gendered genocide. And it's true from my research that the actual genocide was gendered. This film, all the victims are women. Mm-hmm. All the perpetrators are men. In the actual genocide, and I'm not saying you should be doing history, I'm a historian, but that's a different thing. It was the men who suffered most from the genocide. They were killed immediately, butchered, and women suffered because of the marches, the rapes, the existence in the desert, the starvation, but they also had a better chance to survive because they were, as you mentioned, taken into Muslim families, converted, etc. So what was your choice there? Why gendering it? Maybe I'm asking an obvious question. In this particular way, so powerfully, but also in a way for a historian, missing some of the nuance of what actually happened.
Mm-hmm. It's a very pertinent and good question. Thank you, Ron. And I'm happy the second viewing worked better. The screen was better too here. So then when you saw it, I have to say that you have to remember the first scene of the kissing. It's the woman who is actually raping the man. He's reading the sister's letter, but and that was an inversion by me. It was not written like that. So I thought I'll start with giving that sort of prerogative to the man who is being killed in the hand of a woman. We know that was not. We know that a lot of time, still today, that is not the situation. But well, the obvious part perhaps is the fact that I was telling Aurora Mariganian's account. So it was a woman who was talking about her her experience, her pain, her the atrocities that she endured herself, being sold on the market, being attacked, and so on. So we're talking about Aurora Mardiganian. But there is a third reason as well. The men were, as you said, killed right away. And the boys as well, unless they were spared. But the women, they had to endure something very different than the almost mercy of being killed right away. And that was to keep going on, seeing what they had to see and what they had to live with and restart every day. They had to see what was happening to their children. And they had to, I mean, as a mother, as a woman, you were as a wife or a newlywed, you were left with the image and the memory in life. In a way, in these situations, death is much simpler, not easy, but it's simpler in terms of not having the dead one suffer further. It was very important for me to show what women endure and make sense, try to make sense of it in the rest of their life as they continue to live.
So it's a film about survival.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a film about survival. Yes, absolutely.
Ron, you're referring to the film or to the performance itself?
No, the choice.
To the whole effect that I got.
Okay, okay.
So thank you, Arsinée and Marie. And I mean, to pick up on what Ron is saying and how you responded, obviously this is a story of continued trauma that is passed on from one generation to another. And that you yourself, as you revealed with your story of your grandmothers, that clearly that was something also that propelled you to want to tell Aurora's story in the way that you did, right? And I really appreciated the fact that you know, you wanted distance. You wanted also us all to see that it was a construction, that all these stories are constructions. But you chose, you know, the historical material of her oral account herself, which is so powerful, and it, you know, it really portrayed not only her strength but her humanity. I mean, the one clip that you picked up about the bear story. And how she was worried more about what this bear would do to the people who were you know, there was remarkable, and it was a choice, right? So we make choices from this however many minutes you said, 45-minute oral history. And I wanted to ask you about those choices that you made in these
from the oral history,
yes.
like the Zorian. Yes, I would like to give a very brief background about that, is that the Zorian Institute had actually originally what I had with me, or I had sent from Toronto when I was commissioned to do the project. I said, I let the Zorian Institute to send me, I knew that they had about 3 hours worth of material on Aurora Mardiganian, and this was public knowledge at that point, 2015. So they sent it to me, and I started watching it, which I had not that closely. She went on according to the questions, which were supposed to be very academically sort of driven questions, and you know, scientifically driven questions about her place of birth. You know, what were the fruits like, the gardens, etc. Look, so when I arrived towards the end, I was arriving towards the end, I realized there was nothing about auction of souls, and I said to myself, how is that possible? Where is it? It's not there, and then there was maybe 3 minutes where she says to the interviewer, young historian, she says, well, aren't you going to ask me about auction of souls? And he says, sorry, but we don't have enough video left. I mean, this is VHS, right? We don't have any more video left. So she says, but how? It's so important. That film is, it's so important. Something along those lines. And then I hear from further away a voice that says to Rupen, Rupen, I think I have a video left from the previous interview that was shorter than Aurora's, obviously, where there is about 45 minutes or something like that time left on the VHS. I have time on another VHS, it says. And then it stops and it says, end of part 1. And I thought, well, hold on. If it says end of part 1, there must be a part 2. I call Zorian and I say, come on, you didn't send me the whole thing. And they say, no, it's not that we didn't send you the whole thing. The second, I said, where is the second part? They said, it's been lost, but, and if this is not like providence and I don't know, whatever, miraculous, they say, but you know what, Friday, we will be receiving something from Boston, the original place where Zorian was in the early years. We think it's the part 2 of Aurora Mardiganian's on DVD, but we can't tell until we receive it. I said, okay, well, I am coming to Canada for 48 hours. So this was a Wednesday, something like that. And I said, I will give you a call as soon as I get to Toronto. I get to Toronto Friday. Adam picks me up. I call Zorian Institute and I say, so is it hers? They say, hold on, Arsinée, we're just opening the envelope. And I think, really? So they open the envelope and the assistant says, yes, it says Aurora Mardiganian, part 2. I thought, oh my God, this is the most incredible gift that I can have. So we didn't go home. We went directly to the other end of the city to the Zorian office and picked up the DVD. And then I had to go to Ottawa to meet the Armenian ambassador, etc. Anyway, I couldn't watch. I did not have physical time to watch the DVD until I got back to Berlin. And like I arrived to Berlin in the morning, exhausted, at 8, 9, 10 at the apartment. I was put it on and watched it. And here was everything that you see on that 45 minutes.
Hi, thank you for such a thoughtful performance, and thank you both for such an interesting conversation.
Thank you.
My question was about how you approached the sensational or sensationalizing violence. There's so many levels here. I mean, first of all, often survivors have the most unbelievable stories because that's sort of the only way you can survive is by an unbelievable circumstance. But then also this, you know, a survivor, like you said, reenacting her own historical experience not in a documentary film, not where she's, you know, being interviewed, but in a regular movie. So I was just wondering how you approached like the decision maybe of Hollywood to make a fictionalized movie and then, you know, versus her testimony versus you also creating a performance around this movie and her performance, and especially how you navigated, you know, trying not to sensationalize the violence as so many bad genocide movies tend to do. Thanks.
Well, the question of sensationalizing the genocide movies often references to history and imagery had been a concern of mine for a long time, and not because of the films that I had seen, so many films that I had seen on the Armenian Genocide, definitely not. I mean, there were few attempts of very mediocre, sort of quality films, and I mean, violence or not violence, they were irrelevant actually as films to speak to a larger audience than a very ghetto Armenian community. But the question was very important also to my husband in the years before the making of Ararat, because as an Armenian young man at the time, he was being asked by every Armenian who got to know about him and learn about his work, and as a Canadian Armenian, with all the sort of attention he was getting internationally, when are you gonna make a film about the Armenian Genocide? So make a real film. Make a real film. So the running joke between us was that he had yet not made any real film. Even if he was nominated to the Academy Awards, so it was not real because he had not made a film about the Armenian Genocide. So, but when we would discuss seriously about the possibility of, because he had the intention from very early on, but he was just not finding a way of telling that story. He certainly did not want to tell the story with the visualization of the realistic violence that had been all the time accounted for in témoignages, the testimonies of writers. People had written, a lot of Armenians had written their own testimonies, which was a important reference, or the historians who were starting. I mean, yeah. So for me, when I realized that I was going to be confronted with that question again, especially in context of the film that was sensationalizing sexuality, as I say, and the violence and so on, I thought, well, I will not be able to do any of that. I don't want to do any of that. And I saw when Atom did that in the film, within the film, where he just actually makes a point about showing the violence as it occurs, but commenting himself as the filmmaker on the film that he makes, saying that there is no point in showing this violence itself. You have to explain the violence. It doesn't have to be necessarily put an image on, because people are more affected by sometimes, and I'm sure your generation also knows, sometimes you don't see something, and yet you create such an incredible, vivid image that you're terrified by it, and yet there was nothing terrifying really shown. Image is very capable of doing that, and performers as well. So this was very important for me to respect in this work, and but this is not to say, and I'm sure you would agree, that some of the enactments, if not all, but at varying degrees, are very violent. I mean, for me, the pomegranate scene or the woman carrying a child, the pregnant woman scene, which are the same scenes I'm referring to, where she gets cut off, are incredibly violent. The pomegranate is showing the blood, and you just register that probably right away. And I think I felt more comfortable all throughout to do that kind of enactment of the imagination of the reader, viewer, and hearing her stories than actually going and putting a cross and then the women on it, and and when she says, that's not how it happened. So I rather say it, or here, that's not how it happened, but I would say it happened in my imagination, than to say, I'm pretending to show you something as it happened.
Or simply to say that violence is so violent that it is unimaginable, that it's beyond imagination because it's so violent.
And also I find that violence is very pornographic to a certain, there is the pornography of violence. So, and I don't abide to it.
Ladies, thank you so much for
Thank you.
the presentation. Arsinée, do you intend to take this to a wider audience?
Well, you know, I have to say that when this happened in 2015, I had no idea what the life of this play performance would be, because it's something also in between. It's not a play, it's not a performance, it's something like in between and so on. Eventually it went to Armenia to the theater festival, and I have to say thank you to Gorky Theater once again and Sherman Lankov in person again, because they made it all happen. As you would guess, Armenia doesn't have really budgets for anything in general, culturally, nowadays, or in 2017 was it? And so she paid for the whole, everything, actors, technicians, and so on. Everyone was there. They came, and it was a very interesting screening. Probably they missed a bit, performance on stage. But there were like 350 people, like jammed. It was pre-COVID. So, and later, after that, every year it was shown on the stage at Gorky until the pandemic happened. And with the pandemic, she decided that she was going to do like many theaters had done for all kinds of productions. On April 24, she would be doing 24 hours of showing the film version. And that's when the film version had become an option to show the play. I kind of, I would have loved, and I really wanted it to tour, the actual production to tour in the States, Canada, even in Europe, other than Armenia. Somehow it didn't pick up with the, at least with the community or anyone else, you know, in theater. Probably because I didn't do a good job, and I'm not very good at promoting myself. So, but I didn't manage to get it out until this incredible invitation, I have to say, from a university environment, which has been my ideal, in a way to show, because it's something in between history and also performance. And over the last years, many years, but much more strongly now, it's more natural for people, audiences, to see this kind of combinations of artistic hybrid renditions of history and artistic interpretation and so on. So that's why I think this is an amazing start, and I would say it's the first one that really aligns itself with what I was hoping for. But yesterday we were talking with Melanie, and I certainly would not have any hesitation to put it up, because I created but also directed it, so I can do it anywhere. I can continue being part of it with local actors. Maybe at the beginning my concern was also I wanted to tour as opposed to have new creations, because I really trusted the identity of the actors. They were incredible. But it was useful at the time because I had a very short period to rehearse. We had actually rehearsed for the first representation of Auction of Souls for 48 hours with the actors and another 24, or another day with the technicians. This is 3 days. This is 3 days, it's unheard of. So,
Garje, PBS in Modenal.
PBS? Why not? I would say anywhere there is interest, and anywhere there is interest, and I would be happy to even not revise it, but I mean go over it as more maybe adaptable to something new. But and I have all the rights for it. I mean the theater does not. They never ask for it, I do have the rights. I can do it, but I have to feel the enthusiasm and the seriousness of it, which I felt with the university and the foundation's contribution. So thank you.
So thank you everyone for coming, and thank you Arsinée and Marie as well.